Hello, good evening. As you know, this year is the 700th anniversary of the death of Dante Alighieri. And tonight's event is part of the celebrations organized by the committee made of all the Dante Society in Australia, the first time such collaboration has ever occurred. So my welcome to all our friends and around Australia. But first, as it is customary, on behalf of the Dante Alighieri Society, I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the custodians of the land, and recognize their continuing connection to the land, water, and culture. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. But before we listen to Paolo, who will tell us about his personal view on Dante and the making of Italians in Australia, let me welcome Dr. Andrea De Felip, our Consul-General, who has a salute for the wider community of the Dante Alighieri Society in Australia. Welcome, Andrea De Felip, Consul-General.
Thank you, grazie Fabio. Thank you, and I'm very pleased to be with you tonight. And I see many friends, and I wish I could acknowledge each and every one of you. But so please consider yourself all acknowledged. And I am particularly glad to be here with you, friends and members of the Dante Alighieri Society in Sydney. I am particularly delighted to be given the honor of opening this evening lecture with my introductory remarks on this special occasion, also in association with the commemoration of the 700 years of since Dante Alighieri death, as Fabio has highlighted. And I like to in particular to thank the president of the Dante Alighieri, the Dante Society here, and dear friend Fabio Carosone for this privilege. Why a privilege? Well, the privilege descends also from the caliber of this conference's speaker. Paolo Totaro is a man of many talents, but don't expect him to brag about any of them. As a result of either his adopted country's fondness for understatement or his native strong sense of irony, typical of every Neapolitan gentleman, I know Paolo is not particularly keen on public tributes. But as a friend of Paolo, I allow myself tonight of a bit of license to annoy him for just few seconds. Paolo has a degree in law. He graduated as a pianist at the Naples Conservatorium. He's an accomplished poet and a writer, you name it. He came to Australia in his corporate vest as senior executive of Fiat, but then he redirected his talents and driving force to the benefit of the community at large as a public servant in the broadest possible meaning. And I would like to recall his role as Foundation Director of Australia Council, Community Arts Board, Chairman of the Commission of Inquiry into Ethnic Affairs in New South Wales, Foundation Chairman, Permanent Ethnic Affairs Commission, Chairman of the Government Inquiry into Ethnic Affairs in South Australia. Not to mention his innumerable part-time roles in so many academic, cultural, community, and government institutions. As a founder of multiculturalism in Australia, because of his role, his driving force behind that exceptional document that is participation that Paolo was so gracious to share with me. So I was saying, as a founder of multiculturalism in Australia, Paolo is also a mentor of mine. my Virgil, my own Virgil in my own fascinating and challenging journey in multicultural Australia. Tonight, dear friends, you are in for a treat, a real treat. In his lecture, Paolo will be dealing with important and fascinating questions, such as how Dante is remembered by Italians in Australia. Is there a desire to hear his poetic voice? Would readings of Dante be possibly part of reading therapies in nursing and residential care? Could Dante be brought in both English and Italian to more adult learners through Australia's continuing and adult education system, and in particular through the Workers' Education Association? They're all very important, very, very interesting and fascinating topics. I was given the opportunity to enjoy in advance the content of this lecture tonight, and believe me when I say that you will be taken tonight on a wonderful journey rich with personal memories and intellectual and historical reflections on what being Italian and Italo-Australian, of course, means in the present, past, and future. Under this powerful cultural icon, our shared ancestral tutelary figure, as Paolo has so brilliantly and charmingly defined it, Dante Alighieri and his work of art. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Sorry. Thank you for this beautiful introduction. I'm sure that Paolo would be very, very happy to have heard such kind words and some profound thinking about him. As our Consul-General has indicated, Paolo is a multifaceted person. As a graduated in law in Naples, and is a contest pianist and poet and writer and a photographer. One thing which I would like to indicate is that in 1985, or in 2018, much more recently than that, Paolo published a book called Visual Legacy, Italian-Australian Elders, which is a well-documented photographic book dedicated to Italians who served in the community. Worth the reading, worth the looking, excellent photographs taken by himself. Let's be done with the introduction, but I must announce that for technical reasons, Paolo's talk has been recorded. And so be patient for a moment whilst we connect. And Paolo will be anyhow available at the end of the talk, possibly via a chat, if you can like to book yourself. He will be there for us. Okay, so let's go on with the recording, and good listening. Buon ascolto e saluti di nuovo a tutti quanti. Grazie.
Consul-General, Dante Society presidents and members, friends. I acknowledge the ab origine owners of this land and their elders, past, present, and future. More than 400 years ago, after his death in 1616, William Shakespeare may not be as popular as one of today's television celebrities. But it is not unusual to find references to the bard in popular music, television, computer games, while several of his plays have been subject of recent blockbuster modern movies. And while Shakespeare didn't speak our version of English, he is much better understood than Chaucer, who is often referred to as the father of modern English. Dante Alighieri lived 700 years ago and is much further away from us in time than both the two great Englishmen. And yet, he wrote in a form of literary Italian which would fundamentally shape the national language we know today. Dante's Italian is more similar to modern Italian than Chaucer is to modern English. Indeed, Dante's language is as understandable to Italian speakers as Shakespeare's 400-year-old English is to English speakers. And yet, I do not think that T.S. Eliot had this in mind when he said his oft-quoted words, "Dante and Shakespeare divide the world between them. There is no third." Indeed, Dante's works are treasures that should ideally be learned not only as part of a foreign language course, but also a supreme example of how the human brain uses language to make comprehensible the most complex of thoughts. With the Divine Comedy in particular, the more one understands its structure, the more one is stunned by the intersection of myriad stories taken from events of Dante's day or from antiquity, eased into rhyme and meter in a clockwork of happenings involving real humans, God and his negation, with synchronicity of structure, characters, astronomy, geography, mood, lighting, soundtrack, theology, application of divine and human law, as well as dramatic rules of continuity of time and place, of hope or lack thereof. All this tuned into the real world of physics, chemistry, and anatomical knowledge of Dante's time, of course. These were the mind's constructivist miracles, only perhaps equaled by J.S. Bach with his transcendent counterpoint at the service of invention, or by the astronomers, those whose names have been lost in the non-written past, but whose mathematics forecast extraterrestrial events, such as the precise time a ray from the sun might intersect with 2 marks in a monument of stone blocks. Or, nearer us in time, the thinking of Albert Einstein, whose mind games brought him to discover a space-time reality in which we exist, not linked to any of mankind's previous imaginings. We do not measure the ethical world of these great minds with today's criteria. So, if Dante wrote today, could he or would he forever forbid entry to paradise, to all good, non-baptized, who could not know Christ because they were born before him? The most recent census shows that Italo-Australians are now the 6th largest ethnic group in Australia, representing nearly 5% of the population. Around 1 million people claim Italian ancestry, either immigrants or as direct descendants. Italian is the 5th most spoken language at home in Australia. Over the last decades, some newly appointed members of parliament who had Italian ancestry even chose to make their maiden speech in their ancestral language, not in English. These speeches are now forever included in Hansard, not as unrealistic challenges to English as the language of the Constitution, but as gestures of inclusion. While thinking about language and interpreting the theme of this lecture, Dante and the Italians in Australia, as an invitation to talk about the future, I felt it pertinent to center these questions. 1. Is Dante read in Australia, apart from at tertiary and university level? Could Dante be brought to a new cohort of readers, young and old, perhaps through Australia's continuing and adult education centres, and in the Workers' Education Association, the great WEA? Is it possible to build a group of language proficient volunteers who are passionate about a great poet and who might bring his work to residents in Australia's aged care system? As you see, I give emphasis to the old immigrant, also because there are extant issues of human rights coming once again to the fore through the Royal Commission on Aged Care. Its final report came out early in March while I was thinking about this paper. Of the 148 recommendations released by the Royal Commission on the 1st of March 2021, 3 relate to issues relevant here. Older people should be treated as individuals and be provided with support and care in a way that promotes their dignity and respects them as equal citizens. Older people are entitled to pursue and to be supported in pursuing physical, social, emotional, intellectual development, and to be active and engaged members of the community, regardless of their age or level of physical or cognitive capability. Care and support should, as far as possible, emphasize restoration and rehabilitation with the aim of maintaining or improving older people's physical and cognitive capabilities and supporting their self-determination. Allow me to anticipate here one of the conclusions in this talk. Italians of my generation, class of 1933, quietly accept that they are nearing the end of their life. Of those left, many are in nursing homes, lonely and unable to read. Yet there is still potential in both elders and the disabled. One powerful way to unlock potential is through reading to them. It is talking with them. It often releases forgotten capacities. The stories in a book, read aloud, express confidence in the mental potential of the person being read to. Memories of defining events of life, such as the beginning and the ending of a war, are often first to be released when we are being read to. They may elicit tears, but also give proof of continuing life. Relevant to our topic, Dante belongs for many of us Italians to the category of dormant memories, but with an untapped potential waiting to be released when rekindled. We may all have some personal proof of this. In good order. The young Italian immigrants of the 50s had the foresight of raising alarms about the dearth of adequate care for non-English speaking elderly. Today we owe to specialists empowering retirement villages to the then young and charismatic Padre Nevio Capra of the Scalabrini order of missionaries. They are now part of Australia's history, and at the same time are object of the Royal Commission study. Coincidentally, the Royal Commissioner, Tony Pagone, QC, is of Italian extraction. The conditions faced by Australia's elderly were at the forefront of domestic political affairs, while Dante's contribution to modern life dominated my thoughts. And it made me wonder what relevance the 13th century poet might have for older Australians, many of them post-war migrants who had often arrived in Australia and America with little formal education and in some cases barely literate. I decided that the only way to find out was to try to test my notion that poetry of all kinds, and song lyrics for that matter, for all of us, particularly when read in our mother tongue, can be a life-changing, wonderful anchor or raft for memory. In order to sound out my instinct and find out exactly what, if any, meaning the name Dante Alighieri holds for Italo-Australians, I decided to create my own little focus group. And so I gathered together 11 women and men, all of them aged well over 70, and chosen at random from those who frequent the social meetings of Coasit, New South Wales, and invited them to reply to these questions. 1. Do you remember the name Dante Alighieri? 2. Do you remember any of his verse? 3. Do you know if he left a legacy? We all sat around a long conference table, and at first the questions were met with a long silence. Finally, someone said tentatively, "He was a poet, era un poeta." Then someone else added, "He traveled to the Inferno." Then someone else chimed in with Beatrice. Another added something about visiting the dead among the flames. Was he the first to speak Italian? Did he speak a dialect? Asked another. The conversation warmed up, with everyone sharing their shards of recollection. A few words from the famous first stanza of the Inferno, nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita, emerged from another, dragged out from memory, like a childhood nursery rhyme. Then others wondered out loud if the story is of a man who had lost his rightful path and wanted to return on the road to eternal life. There were flashbacks of recognition. All were trying to remember how or why they knew those few lines. What was interesting was that everyone showed signs of a growing interest until one of the visibly younger ones of the group wondered out aloud if we could read a little more of the Inferno at a future meeting, perhaps introduced by some plain English narration to explain the when, where, why, and what. At the end, the group had declared support for hearing Dante and about Dante. Even better if in the safety of being with other Italians of the same vintage. The conversation moved from puzzled to enthusiastic. Dante, who at the beginning of the meeting was just a name, if anything, could reacquire in a small focus group some of the warm closeness we think we feel with him. Before I outline a modest proposal on how to pursue the potential of the focus group, allow me a little diversion. From the 34th and last canto of the Inferno, which closes with Dante and Virgil ending their visit in hell, and reappearing at Sydney Leichhardt, generally known as Australia's Little Italy. Dante is preparing to ascend a rocky mountain, Purgatory, near Jerusalem, as Virgil has warned him that it is time to end their visit to Inferno, hoisting him onto his shoulders in readiness to move on. Managing to avoid the flapping wings of the terrible Pipistrello, Satan in the form of a bat, Virgil pulls himself and his charge up onto Lucifer's frozen body, using the dayfilled tufts of hair like mountain robe. With Dante on his back, Virgil performs then a startling feat. As they reach Lucifer's waist, Virgil slowly turns himself around, climbing back upward to finally lower himself and Dante down. And, this is my license, Dante reappears. And here, I'm going to take you to the bronze sculpture of the great poet in Leichhardt, cast and placed on a plinth in a little piazza enclosed by brand new apartments in Sydney's Little Italy. I keep thinking about this effigy, portrayed with the aquiline nose and laurel crown of so many sculptures of Dante, a kind of central casting version of the great poet. The sculpture is some of what remains of a grand 1988 plan to build an Italian cultural center in Leichhardt on land bequeathed by the then New South Wales Labour government at a time when Australia was readying to celebrate its bicentenary and the arrival in 1788 of the British colonists. Of course, the taking of indigenous Australians' land belongs to a different, as yet unresolved, national story. In the end, the funds to build the ambitious new cultural center could not be found, and a compromise was thrashed out, which saw the construction of a mixed residential and commercial complex with space for the Leichhardt Public Library, a small theater with conference facilities now owned by Coasit and made available for lease to community groups. Dante's statue, forlorn and rather abstract, remains in the little square, out of context, and yet witness to the complexity of giving his abstractions greatness, but omnipresent still. In the Divine Comedy, Dante Alighieri was, of course, also the exiled politician, and both a real and invented narrator. He is a character among many, some historical and some mythical, that populate his three other worlds. His Inferno is a gigantic pit, with space enough to allow an infinity of instruments of torture to do their job for an eternity of time. Purgatory is the mountain that allows souls to ascend towards God, albeit slowly and painfully, while paradise is a self-contained universe of planetary spheres rotating around each other in perfect harmony, and with God as the blinding light at the center. In the three realms, each sin, each punishment, and every happiness is assigned an ethical grade, commensurate with laws of nature given by God. The Divine Comedy expounds Dante's core belief that man's desire to understand the truth of nature are what drive his highest innate compulsions. For scholars and readers, Dante is a great poet who lived in the late Middle Ages, whose literary, philosophical, and linguistic legacy remains. But to us Italians, whether in the northern or the southern hemisphere, whether we can read his works deeply or not, he remains a symbol of an ancestral, tutelary figure who continues to hint at the possibility, however small, of a reflected greatness in us all. From the southern hemisphere, I would like to return briefly to the northern and my personal experience of Dante as a child. I was born in 1933, and my earliest years were spent in wartime Naples, one of the most bombed European cities by the Allies. For me, 1939 to 1945 meant fear. And yet Dante's retelling of a story that meant to my childish ears that there is the chance of a return ticket from death acted as a reassurance. I remember clearly, while being prepared for our first Holy Communion, that we were all warned about punishment for our mortal sins, and that these punishments would be for eternity. The law of contrapasso was crystal clear. The Jesuit fathers, my teachers, ensured that revealed truths of the Church would exert as powerful a control of our minds as possible. Of course, I say this without rancor, because there are many teachers whose memory, knowledge, and sense of duty I respect to this day. In fact, it makes me smile in retrospect that when it came to sin, Dante piqued my curiosity as a child. What were these sins in their full modality that he spoke of? What was this lust, greed, pride that resulted in the horrors of punishment of the Inferno? All these ponderings welded together. Dante, sin, the relentless Allied bombing, the bomb shelters, German occupation, and then the Allied liberation. I remember the sirens warning of another strafe, and my father lifting me out of my bed with a practiced swing, and with my mother, a thermos in hand, with our path lit only by moonlight, descending in larger and larger group, the steps from our homes to bomb shelter beneath the Petrai of funicular rail station. As we went further down the tunnel of the central funicular, the one that still links the center of Naples with the Movero hillside, the sound of explosions became more muffled and less frightening. The volcanic stone tufa that always appears worryingly porous acquired solidity, and the further we ventured downward as a resigned group, the more we trusted the stone. I remember that my father would recite in quiet, calm voice the reassuring verses in which Dante speaks of the safety of the flock. Come le pecorelle escon dal chiuso, a una, a due, tre, e l'altre stanno timidette, atterrando l'occhio e il muso, e ciò che fa la prima e l'altre fanno, addossandosi a lei s'ella s'arresta, semplici e quete, e l'on perché non sanno. Si vid'io muover a venir la testa di quella mandra fortunata a lotta, pudica in faccia e nell'andare onesta. This is from the Purgatory, the third canto, and this is a simple translation. As sheep come issuing forth from out the fold, by ones and twos and threes, and the others stand, timidly holding down their eyes and nostrils. And what the foremost does, the others do, huddling themselves against her if she stops. Simple and quiet, and wherefore know not. So moving to approach us, thereupon, I saw the leader of that fortunate flock, modest in face, and dignified in gait. The translation was the famous one of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, 1867. This is, of course, the moment when Dante and Virgil together are searching for the best path to ascend the mountain of purgatory, when a flock of fresh souls approaches them. Virgil, like a polite tourist, asks for directions to the crest of the mount and out. And Dante compares these souls in a gentle, elegant analogy. In fact, I know no one more beautiful than this. Compares the souls to sheep emerging from their pasture or pen, quiet, undemanding, each one trusting and following the one ahead. Dante highlights that this docile disposition of the souls helps them endure and share the pain of walking upward in search of purification. In turn, the souls express surprise that Dante projects the shadow of a man still alive in his material body, unlike them. Virgil explains that Dante has earned the privilege of ascending the rocky path in his earthly flesh, and so, in purgatory, both body and soul are granted a path toward forgiveness, as well as the courage to face the new challenge. Ah, my dear Father, my father's recitation of Dante's message has always remained with me, particularly during the terrible years of Allied occupation, when Neapolitans cast aside any pretense of dignity, selling themselves and their daughters and children for food, cigarettes, and wars. I have several other childhood memories of Dante appearing in the strangest of places. Once returning home in the funicular with my father, a tall, stooped man who was known to all as an eccentric mathematician stood in the carriage and recited what my father later told me was Dante's prayer to the Virgin Mary through San Bernard. It was part of the Paradise. And I'm reciting in Italian now. Vergine Madre, figlia del tuo figlio, umile ed alta più che creatura, termine fisso d'eterno consiglio. Tu sei colei che l'umana natura nobilitasti sì, che il suo fattore non disdegnò di farsi sua fattura. Paradiso, canto 33. Translation in English. Virgin and Mother, daughter of thy Son, lowly and exalted, more than any creature, fixed goal of the eternal sapiens. You are she who so ennobled human nature that its own maker did not scorn to become its own creature. I remember clearly that the conductor allowed the performance to continue, even allowing a delay before opening the doors. And also that as they left, the passengers were unusually hushed. It was 1946, after all. While writing this paper, I also riffled through some old family letters, and to my delight found several Dante verses written in my mother's handwriting nearly 9 decades ago. It reminded me that it was she who had taught and encouraged me to write little poems, first in basic meter and rhyme, then in terzine and quartine, ABBA, ABBA, CDE, EDC. But away from reminiscences and back to my original proposal, but bringing once more Dante back into the 21st century Australia. The small round table made me think that there may well be an appetite to experiment and find a way to bring Dante to an audience who knew him but want to know more of him. I am an alumnus of the WA, the Workers' Education Association, and know it firsthand because in the past few years I enrolled in the Advanced Latin course at the WA in Goulburn Street, Sydney, led by a very competent lecturer. A small group of us mature students met once a week and took on a Latin curriculum created in British universities. We worked on histories, essays, plays, and poems written in Latin. Homework was translation from Latin and into English, and our enthusiasm as students matched that of our teacher. With this experience in mind, I decided to test my idea, to build a new WA course to try to bring Dante to his people in Australia, something that the Dante Alighieri Society by itself cannot at the moment do for lack of facilities and funds. I had an informal chat with WA's education director, who replied generously and authorized me to say that the WA will embrace the idea of creating and organizing a public course on Dante. Whether it is delivered in Italian, English, or both, in translation, or encouraging reading and translating, well, all that is for discussion and thought. Ultimately, it is the will that counts, and WA are open in any model, to any model, tutors well-versed in Dante who might bring their skill and knowledge to a new audience, or perhaps it will be an initiative from an organization that already has a Dante curriculum. However it is run, intellectual property of the proposing group will remain with them, with the WA acting as the host organization for delivery. And I would be delighted to help in these first contacts, hopefully face-to-face and not on Zoom. I believe passionately that if Dante were read in Australia by more people, it would be a great, great achievement in reciprocal cultural participation. Knowing Dante is as enlightening and inspiring and exciting as knowing Shakespeare, James Joyce, T.S. Eliot. Knowing Dante is about telling a great story, how human beings recount their thoughts and dreams. We need greater support for institutions where languages are studied. Our schools, our universities, our multilingual television stations, our international health and peace bodies. All are part of our civil society and of our capacity to participate. Beethoven is often used to describe a point of communion where all humans of all cultures can find a common, visceral thread. But Beethoven needs no less preparation than Shakespeare or Dante. There still is potential in the elders and the disabled. Reading to them is talking with them. It often releases forgotten potential. The stories in a book, offered aloud, express confidence in the mental potential of the person being read to. Memories of defining events of life, such as the beginning and the end of a war, are often first to be released when we are being read to. They may elicit also tears, but give proof of continuing life. Dante belongs for many of us Italians to the category of dormant memories, but with an untapped potential to be released when rekindled. I have personal proof of this. Please allow me to offer thanks to some who are not with us anymore, but who have for decades taught Italian and Dante at the University of Sydney, from Rosina Tedeschi and quote Mr. Shaw, unquote, to the unforgettable Nicoletta Zanardi, to Fred May, Gino Rizzo, Silvio Trambaiolo, Giovanni Carsaniga, and many others. Thanks also to the Italian Institute of Culture, which helps identify and publicize events with Italian connections, presenting lectures and exhibitions, and teaching loyal groups of mature students who year after year read Italian authors, from Dante to contemporaries, while learning Italian. And then there is the Sydney Dante Alighieri Society, small but driven by motivated members, with no assistance whatsoever from the Dante Alighieri head office in Rome, who still doggedly offer monthly events on Italian themes. Last but not least, the already mentioned COASIT in Australia is an Australia-wide professional, not-for-profit organization with public finalities and solid foundations that runs a bilingual primary school as part of the New South Wales education system, and a number of courses for adults on Italian language and culture. COASIT reaches the whole Italo-Australian community of Sydney, including the most important suburbs where most Italo-Australians live, work, and study. It is a professional setup that allows it to undertake projects directed to diverse audiences. I feel strongly that we should be as ambitious and courageous as possible in continuing to promote Dante in the 21st century, especially in new territory, such as the Australian continuing education system. And while I know I have focused on the elderly until now, it may be because the young have beaten us to it. I'm thrilled to learn that Dante's grabbed the imagination of newer generations. During lockdown, for example, the comic book artist and manuscript maker George Cochrane managed to kickstart funds via the internet to create an epic, new, illustrated manuscript of the Divine Comedy in time for the 700th anniversary celebrations. George first encountered Dante in 1994 as a student on his junior year abroad in Florence, and became impassioned by the allegorical genius. He became intrigued and somewhat obsessed with the idea of recreating the work in a 21st century style. But just like a medieval monk, he woke before dawn to scribe his manuscript page and would write every single day for months as many lines as he could complete before going to work. All in all, George Cochrane has scribed all 350,000 characters, all 3 canticles, all 14,233 verses of the Divine Comedy. The new manuscript, funded by generous people all over the world, will be published in both Italian and English, Singleton's translation. It was recently described by Wayne Story, Professor Emeritus in Italian and Medieval Studies at Indiana University, as the most accurate illustrated edition of the Divine Comedy I have seen. So 50 years after I found myself on a bus with my 2 children in Sydney, only to hear someone shout, "Don't speak your lingo here, you bloody dago. Speak Australian." It gives me great joy to look forward to Dante, the great writer and sculptor of my mother tongue, and to continue dreaming about a continuing presence in this new world. But it also heartens me to remember that even peripheral, Dante was present in spirit during my contribution to Neville Wran and his Labour government vision to create a new multicultural Australian identity. And these words were tabled in Parliament 40 years ago. The long search for an Australian identity is taking a new turn. New identity is now emerging through huge shifts in community values, tastes, style, norms. The products of this new Australian civilization include, side by side with the great gifts of the cultures from the United Kingdom and Eire, the contributions from the many other cultures now part of Australia. This was from participation, report to Parliament of an inquiry into ethnic affairs, June 1978. So, not just Shakespeare and Chaucer, but Dante too. It's the future. Thank you very much.
Paolo, you deserve a great big round of applause from everybody of us. It's been a most thrilling and fantastic presentation, and I'm sure that everybody enjoyed it thoroughly. Now, if anybody would like to put any question to Paolo, Paolo will be happy to answer it. And I see that nobody has used the chat mean of putting questions. So if anybody wants to speak to or put a question, please raise your hand so we can see him and unmute you. It looks to me you're all very much reflective yet, because you had so much to intake out of this perfect event and conference that Paolo allowed us to enjoy. Anybody raising his hand? Rosemary, but you have to unmute you. You have to unmute you. The microphone. Rosemary, if you can hear, you have to click on the microphone icon and unmute you. That's it.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say, Paolo, that was a very absolutely inspiring and deeply intellectual, but also deeply spiritual talk that I found very, very encouraging and very, very beautiful. I don't know Dante's works as well as you do, but you've inspired me at this late stage to read them properly. I've looked at them, I've read them, but not thought in the way that you obviously have. I guess I've done that with Shakespeare, but I've loved the journey you've taken me on tonight. I'm sure everybody here has felt that has felt that kinship with you as a human being. So thank you. Thank you, Paolo.
Thank you, Rosemary. Thank you. Any other person? Yes, Pina.
Buonasera. First of all, Paolo, that was it was amazing and a lot to reflect on. I just have one little comment, and myself, a lot of people think Dante is highbrow reading. It's upper level education. But when I was listening to you speaking about older people and putting the question out there about Dante, it just made me think, I wonder how many beautiful elderly people know a verse or a line or even a few words from Dante that would just bring so much joy in remembering, and maybe some sadness or some memories that were not so good. But I thought, I wonder how many more people, has anyone ever thought about that and engaging with the elderly on such a simple thing to bring communication and joy and, you know, evoke memories of whatever kind they are. I just want to congratulate, that was just beautiful. Thank you.
Come faccio a parlare?
Parla, Paolo.
Posso, se parlo così mi sentite?
Sì, sì, sì.
Volevo ringraziarvi, sono confuso dalle cose gentili che avete detto, ma le apprezzo e le tengo. Credo che l'idea di leggere agli anziani sia una cosa che può sembrare un po' cervellotica, mettersi lì a leggere nel mezzo del cammino di nostra vita qualcuno che sta a letto, che non si sente male. Però posso assicurare, dal punto mio di vista, durante la mia lunga vita ho visto tante persone andarsene ed ho visto che negli ultimi giorni, nelle ultime settimane, negli ultimi anni di vita, c'è come un desiderio di acchiapparsi a ciò che non si è imparato e di imparare di più. Sto parlando in inglese, I'm sorry. My wife tells me, sorry. Just I wanted to say that it is an idea that needs to be tested. Personally, I'm sure that if properly done with heart, with a minimum organization, and with the help of fundamental organizations such as Concetta's Italian Australian Women's Association, with COASIT, with students of the Department of Italian that could be motivated to act as intermediaries in this. I think it's something that could be done and should be done. I certainly will put my little bit of energy into it if anybody is interested. But Concetta is here, and if she wants to say a few words about it.
Anthony and Jeffrey, they want to say something.
Anthony, the microphone.
Yes, I have removed the microphone. Yes, Paolo, first of all, let me congratulate you for a most beautiful, probably one of the best talks ever. There was your heart, there was your soul, there was your knowledge, there was your sensitivity, and it was really something that gave us, I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of everybody else tonight. Thank you, Pina, for your point. It's a very good point. And in fact, with Paolo, we have been thinking about something like that, you know, trying to organize events, reading Dante to anziani. So something really specific, something really which we believe could be of could be great for our elderly, and have the same effect that Paolo told us about the focus group that he organized in the past. So Paolo, our association, the Australian Women's Association, will be more than happy.
Oh, fantastic.
Meet up with you and talk about what would be the best way to deliver such a proposal. And I'm sure we will make lots of people very happy, very, very happy.
Yeah.
Brava Concetta. Anthony Jeffrey wants to.
I am Sally Jeffrey. I'm sitting with Anthony on his computer. So, hello, Paolo. And I have sent this question to everybody. But first, thank you for all the people who spoke before me to express all the thanks and love for Paolo's wonderful talk. You say it so much better than I, but I echo all the thoughts. Paolo, sitting on our bookshelf for years and years is the Divine Comedy. As you can see, everybody, it has never been.
Very old translation.
Yeah, it's never been opened. And
it has.
Oh well, we have dipped into it. It was translated by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow.
Yeah.
And my question is, how would you recommend the beginning of the journey? Is it something just to dip into at particular sections, or would you advise from your experience to begin at the beginning and make a journey from the very start? Or could you please, your opinion?
May I redirect the question to people who know more than me? Professor Borghesi or Paolo Marmini, they are there and will give you a much more concrete and reliable answer than mine.
So the collective wisdom amongst us all, how does one begin this great work?
From the beginning.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. Straight answer. Okay, thank you.
If I say what Paolo is somewhat announced today doesn't end tonight, because we are putting together a cooperation with Francesco Borghesi, the head of the Italian department at the University of Sydney, with Paolo naturally, with Concetta, and encourage it. Try to move forward this proposal to encourage, in this particular case, the reading of Dante, maybe not only Dante, but also other poetry to the elderly. It is going to be difficult to achieve it, but can be done. And so we need some encouragement, support, and help. Any more questions?
All we have to do is to sit down and read to each other.
Yes, indeed. But we must not read Dante to each other. We must read it to somebody else.
I ask a question. What happened to the subtitles?
Okay, if I see that there are no further questions, and I want to thank all of you. I want to thank the Consul-General for his...
Fabio,
yes.
Fabio, posso? Chiedo scusa per questa interruzione e anche chiedo scusa per, come ho scritto prima, che sono stato incapacitato a partecipare all'inizio a questo evento, ma vorrei, in senso, come attività di questo progetto della rete da Dante in Australia, assolutamente ringraziare Paolo per il suo ottimo lavoro, per la sua ottima presentazione, di cui Marco Curtotti mi aveva già informato del contenuto, e dunque voglio ringraziare Paolo in persona, e poi fare i miei complimenti al Comitato di Sydney per il sostegno al progetto nazionale che ha portato a questo evento di stasera, e sperando che, come Dante dall'Australia, come vedete da Dante dall'Australia, possiamo continuare a fare cose ancora più impegnative da tutte le parti. Dunque siamo aperti a tutto, ma volevo ringraziare da parte della Dante Alighieri di Canberra particolarmente, e poi da parte del gruppo nazionale per questo evento e per l'impegno del Comitato di Sydney, di tutti i componenti del Comitato di Sydney, e in modo più particolare a Paolo Totaro, l'amico Paolo Totaro, che ci riconosciamo da tantissimi anni, e sono veramente molto rammaricato di non aver potuto partecipare in totale a questa presentazione, ma che spero di vedere in completo al più presto possibile. I excuse myself for those who might not have understood my message, but it was particularly important, I think, to give it to Paolo. I wanted to do that personally, and to Fabio. Thank you very much for allowing me to make this sort of intervention. Thank you.
Grazie anche.
Thank you, Franco, for
Fabio.
Yes, for those who doesn't know about it, Franco is the president of the Dante Alighieri of Canberra. There is a question from Elizabeth Everett.
It's right.
Elizabeth, your microphone.
Oh, hello. Am I on?
Yes, you are.
Can you hear me? Oh, okay. Thank you. I just wanted to thank Paolo. I have had the privilege of reading Dante with Paolo some years ago. We studied it together, and I'll be ever grateful to Paolo for helping me to read Dante. Unfortunately, I had to be in my car tonight, so I couldn't hear everything as clearly as I wanted. So I hope it's recorded and we can get a copy later. Wonderful. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Grazie molto. Grazie molto, Paolo.
Grazie.
There is a chat from Marco Cutotti to everybody. Such a beautiful presentation. Indeed, such a beautiful presentation. Indeed, journey you have taken us on. Inspirational, profound in its knowledge and resonance, and indeed spiritual, as has been commented on, and so connected with life. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. There is another message from Andy and Trish. Paolo knows that Andy and I think, Bruce Shaw's book, Reading Dante, is a great introduction for Australians to become enthusiastic about reading Dante. And there is Rose Genovese that sends congratulations to Paolo, absolutely an excellent presentation. And what else? Concetta suggests that propongo di fare i sottotitoli a questo video, perché sono certa che potrebbe essere apprezzato anche in Italia. Una bella cosa, è un bel lavoro. Si può fare se qualcuno si presenta per farlo. Prima di chiudere questa bellissima serata, vorrei anticipare che per la fine di giugno o the beginning of luglio, sorry, I should not switch from Italian to English, it's so easy. But for the end of June or beginning of July, we had in the program of showing an incredible film shot or produced in 1911 in Milan, and it's called Inferno. It's a production that lasts 68 minutes and is a fantastic representation of the most salient and fantastic points of the Inferno, the travel of Dante and Virgilio through Inferno. is an absolutely outstanding production, and was considered at the time a masterpiece of Italian cinema. And looking at it, you got no hesitation to really admit so. So that will happen. I will be sending the necessary information and invitation in due time. Further on the year, we have one which is so topical, and it's a conference on pandemics, plagues, and other worldwide happening, starting from the Roman Empire through the medieval times up to the Great Plague of 1600, which everybody probably knows about it, having read I Promessi Sposi by Alessandro Mazzoni. So all of these haven't got a precise date at the moment. Hopefully, we'll try to make them in persona, vis-a-vis, because much as Zoom is a very convenient way of reaching many people, like tonight, from Sydney and further away, physical eye contact is a much better way to go about. So I congratulate Alice, who was nursing a newborn baby, and we look forward to meeting her soon. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for attending.
Fabio, thank you so much also, to DAS Sydney. Just to mention that John Kinder will be speaking in Perth on the theme Dante and the Clash of Civilization, in quote. And I'll just post the link for it in our chat box. And John Kinder is here with us tonight as well. So just to acknowledge John. But thank you again to Paolo and Fabio. It's such a beautiful evening, and thank you, friends.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. So, if nobody else, I want to thank you very much, Paolo, for this excellent presentation. And I know that you spent hours and hours and hours working at the preparation of it, and even caused you to lose some sleep at night, as Patricia told us. So thank you very much again. Thank you again, Andrea, for your participation.
Fabio,
Yes.
Fabio, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me? Yes, thank you. I'm very, very sorry that I came in late. I'm from Melbourne, from DAS Melbourne. We are in lockdown now. I was in the office for most of my day, and I just arrived home late. I'm very sorry, but it sounded really interesting, and I'm looking forward to getting the recording. So thank you very much. Yes.
Yes, indeed. All these events are recorded and will be available in a day or two on our YouTube page, on the Dante YouTube page, for who has missed it or who wants to listen to it again. And it will take a day or two before we can get it going. It's a bit of a work for
That's okay.
We're very, very busy. So thank you very much, everybody. And I'm leaving the meeting now. Bye-bye.
Bye.